Okay, so if I could introduce both the speaker and the new session, because in the last 18 months, we believe we've made great progress with our Zoom meetings, and we've attracted a worldwide audience and given many members the chance to share the benefit of meetings, albeit virtually, that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to attend. So this year we plan to continue with this progress and a new programme that I've organised with 10 meetings, one a month, on a variety of topics. So welcome to all those of you who've joined us today, whether you be members, fellows, or indeed prospective members who have shown an interest in the Society. And because of this, we have sent you a link and an invitation to the talk. And it seems fitting that, given we're starting a new season, we should commence the season with a special speaker. Many of you will know Jonas Hällström. He's a signatory to the role of Distinguished Philatelist, and I think at the present time he may very well be the youngest person on the roll. He will no doubt correct me if that's not the case. He's a well-known thematic philatelist, having cut his teeth on a number of topics, including naval ones, naval warfare, and has many international awards throughout the world. And recently we tend to forget, because of time in this COVID world, that just before lockdown, or not long before it, we had a very, very special international exhibition in Stockholm. And Jonas was behind this as the principal organizer. And I'm sure that most people, or at any rate, an awful lot of people who are attending this talk today will have attended, and they know that it was wonderful. So the Royal was a major beneficiary to that, and we thank him and his countrymen for their efforts. Thank you very much, Jonas. So with that introduction, we have great expectations for today, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. As Mike introduced when he were talking about my philatelic background, I have my roots in philately, in thematic philately. Many of you know my collection of sailing ships, which now is retired since a while back. My current thematic team I am working with is a collection about war, which has been shown publicly a while ago, but I am working on it, and it will come back to the philatelic scene as fast as we can meet again at exhibitions. As I have spent most of my life in this hobby, my philatelic interests have grown along the way. So some of you also recognize that I am doing postal history. I have had 2 collections of Swedish postal history, which both now are retired. And the next time you will see something on postal history from me is that will be a collection of phonopost, voicemail, which I am dealing on from the whole world. So that will be something to show in the future as well. I have not totally left sailing ships. Denmark, they have a fantastic issue of a sailing ship, a caravel, in the imprint on postal stationery, and that is a collection still active in my interests. And along this way, I have also grown philatelically and have 2 collections in traditional philately. One on the Swedish definitives, depicting the King of Sweden and his Queen Sylvia. And the collection we are here for today to know more about, the Commonwealth of Australia, the high values depicting the 6 different navigators. And this is the first time I talk about this collection, and for the first time also actually to tell an audience that I am doing this collection. And when Mike invited me, I accepted, because I thought this is a very positive occasion to actually share this collection with you. And as all of you are experts, you can all give me the feedback after the presentation on where I might improve, not only on how I present this collection, but also improve on perhaps some findings you know better than I do. So please not hesitate to give me any feedback and remarks on the content of today's presentation, because this is something I have learned is very, very positive of presenting things like I do to you today. Okay, coming to the subject for today's presentation, I will talk about this collection of the navigators, and the background is shortly that in 1963 the Australian Post Office, they had to replace high value stamps with a new series, and they decided to honoring the new series with the 6 navigators on the screen here. And just to give you a short introduction thematically who these 6 are, the first stamp which was issued was depicting Abel Tasman. He was a navigator, a Dutch navigator, and he sailed in the 17th century to the Australian continent and discovered Tasmania. And on the stamps, which you will see on the next slide, his ship is also depicted, which is a typical ship type galleon of that time. The second stamp issued is by Matthew Flinders, and he undertook considerable exploration and charting of the continent, and he became the first navigator to actually circumnavigate the continent of Australia. And he sailed together with his companion, George Bass, which is depicted on the 3rd stamp in this issue. And they made various explorations together, and the Bass Strait between the continent of Australia and Tasmania is named after George Bass. Probably all of you know James Cook, this English naval officer who first discovered and charted the eastern part of Australia, and he is depicted on one of the 6 stamps. The 5th navigator is Philip Parker King, who conducted lengthy service, and he sailed with his ship Mermaid, which also is depicted on the stamp. And the 6th navigator in concern for today's issue is William Dampier, who was an English explorer who first visited northern Australia in 1688, and his ship is also depicted on the stamp. And the name of that ship was Roebuck. So this is the only thematic context I will put in place today, because this is, as I said in my start, this is a traditional philately study on these 6 stamps. The 6 different stamps, they were issued at 4 different occasions. The first stamp, the 4 shilling to the left, it was issued in October 1963. The second and the third stamp was issued in February 64, the 4th and 5th stamp in August 64, and the last stamp in November 1964. And these are in the category of named pre-decimals in Australia. Pre-decimals refers to that the currency used in the denominations is the pound. And as you will find out later in this presentation, what makes this issue interesting is because the design was used twice. First for the pre-decimals, with pound values, and again when the currency reform was made and dollar values decimals were issued. And have in mind from the very beginning that this is high values. So what makes them interesting is, of course, to explore the fantastic availability of mixed frankings, where these high values are combined with uses to pay for high rates, preferably airmail rates to overseas destinations from Australia. So you easily understand that solo uses are in focus to be even more interesting, as solo uses on high values are rare to find. For those of you not immediately understanding the pound and how it is structured, I have prepared this slide. As you should know, is that the pound was not a decimal currency. 1 pound was divided into 20 shillings, which makes 240 pence to the pound. And this is spoken in this presentation as LSD, pounds, shillings, and pence. I am sure that all of you knows that the pound and the symbol for that is the L for Libra pound, where Libra in Latin means scales of balance. The S for the shilling is Latin for solidus, and D is Latin for denarius, and solidus and denarius, they were Roman coins. And for today's presentation, to follow the denominations of these stamps, we have one denomination which is 7 shillings and 6 pence, and that is written on the stamps as 7/6. And a flat 4 shilling denomination is written on the stamps 4/-. So that makes it understandable to follow the denominations. When these 6 different stamps were issued at 4 different locations, the Australian Post, they used to introduce stamps on presentation sheets, like the 4-1 on the screen. And these presentation sheets, they were sent to Australian embassies and overseas trade missions and placed there for public viewing. And in a traditional philatelic study, I have made these part of my study and treatment, because they are, of course, part of how Australia Post introduced these stamps and how they were introduced commercially. And of course, to this limited target groups around the world, they were not many made. Less than 50 are thought to have been made from the beginning. Many of them were thrown away. So a few of them only have survived. So these presentation sheets are quite rare to find, actually, but I have seen them from time to time, and I am lucky to have the 4 here on the screen for all 4 issues. But addressing the stamps, as with other stamps, they were presented also as proofs, and the 6 existing die proofs are presented on this screen. And until 1964, Australian Post, they produced up to 10 sets of these presentation proofs, and from 1964 the number decreased, as you saw on this slide, where I have the 6 proofs depicted. The first proof of the 4 shilling was made in 10, and the consecutive 4 proofs from there was made in 9, and the 5 shilling was only made in 8. And these proofs, presentation proofs, they were given to the Queen and to representatives of Australian Post and to the members of the Stamp Advisory Committee. And when they were presented in the envelope, which I have to the left here. And I have all the 6 envelopes to my 6 proofs, which makes them, of course, the provenance more interesting. Unfortunately, these proofs, they were originally cut into matting, and the glue which was used have unfortunately caused extensive staining over time. And some proofs I have seen, other than those I have, they have this stain over the proofs. But luckily, the previous owner of these proofs, he actually took off the matting, and my 6 proofs, they are not sunk into this matting and have been saved from this staining, even though you can see some staining on the 1 pound and 2 pound proof here. So these are, of course, the starting point for how the stamps were presented, the presentation sheets and the die proofs. And here I have a big surprise for the day today. It has not been recorded yet until now that I also in my collection have this discovery proof of James Cook, 7 shillings 6 pence. It is this pair, which other than the 9 recorded presentation proofs is a presentation proof presented here as a pair. And you can see this staining of the glue from the tape, which was used when it originally was presented on a card or similar. But this is, of course, a great item I have found, not myself, but a dealer found it for me, and he and I agreed that I will make the discovery public at a day to come, and today is that day. And I will also give you another public discovery later in my presentation. Okay, as I said in the beginning, this is high values, and they were printed in a quality printing process using intaglio printing and nickel electrotype plates. And this process ensured a very high quality stamps printed in large quantities. And they were printed by the note printing branch of the Reserve Bank of Australia. And they were intended to be used, as I said also before, as multi-rate combinations. As a reference to understand how the denominations actually are corresponding with the flat letter rate of the time, a normal flat letter rate at the time when these were issued was 5 pence. So for example, the 2 pound denomination correspond with 96 times that basic rate. So you can have a feeling on how high these denominations are. And you will find out later that only 1 commercial use is recorded of the 2 pound. So that makes it very, very rare. And also cutouts of with the 2 pound are rare. The sources I am using register less than 10 cutouts of 2 pound existing, and I have at least 3 in my collection, and I have depicted my page here so you can see that the 2 pound is something extra. Solo uses are of course interesting, and here is one example of the 4 shilling. This is a solo use to Canada, paying for the second weight step airmail letter rate from Australia, which was 2 shilling per half ounce, effective from 1958. Another very rare solo use is this solo use of 7 shillings 6 pence James Cook, which here is used on a commercial cover, used the first day to Sweden of all countries. And the 7 shilling 2 pence reflects second weight step to Sweden for the letter, and 3 shilling for registration to Sweden. All in all, correct rate paid. And this is another denomination which is very rare to find on use. Less than 10 7 shilling 6 pence James Cook stamps are registered on cover, not solo use, but also in combination. So this is also something to look after. A 1 pound solo use on this commercial item, a parcel tag on a parcel from Australia to England. And this is for the weight step 7 to 11 pounds in 1964 to UK. Also a very rare use. less than 10 £1 denominations are registered as well. So you can easily follow that the use of these high denominations on any commercial item, not only solo uses, they are rare. Here is an intended use, the 5 shilling combined with a mixed franking on a second weight step airmail letter with registration to USA, paying totally 9 shilling correct franking. Another very beautiful mixed franking is this 14 shilling franking for the 6 weight step airmail letter rate with registration to USA, combining the Flinders and Tasman denominations. A beautiful cover. Another very beautiful mixed franking is this collecting payment on surcharged mail. The fact is that Kodak, the photo company, they had to pay 286 articles which were surcharged totally on £11, 19 shilling and 6 pence. And here I am very happy for the use of the £1 bass together with the 4 shilling Tasman. But I believe my Australian friends here online, they probably are even more fascinating by the 5 examples of the £2 coat of arms and combined with this Navigator franking. This is one of my favorite items in my collection. And again, the use of the £1 is of course a fascinating item here. A second mixed franking where I have the James Cook stamp is this mixed franking together with Queen Elizabeth 3 pence twice used to pay for the 8 shilling rate, third weight step air letter mail with registration to USA. And just to show that I have really browsed the market to find the rare examples, again, I have James Cook. This is a printed matter use on a postal stationery 5 pence wrapper. Together with the 3 stamps, it pays for 8 shilling 3 pence third airmail printed matter rate to the United States of America. And to wrap up the pre-decimals, I would like to talk about the Soldiers Club in Gloucester, Australia. This Soldiers Club, they held elections to the committee, the board of the club in 1965. And for that, they distributed election bills to the members. And the members, they were allowed to use a service, business reply mail. So it was collected by the club and the postage for the return mail with the votes were paid by the returning officer of the club. And here you can see a use of a combination mixed franking with 2 stamps of the £2, 1 example of the £1 and 1 example of the 10 shilling. And together with the coat of arms £2 stamp and the 6 pence bird stamp, all in all, this is £7, 10 shillings and 6 pence. And this is paying for the 301 returned voting bills to the club. And the business reply mail was paid by the returning officer of the club for these 301 articles, paying for paying the letter rate, which was 5 pence, as I said before. And the fee for this service was 1 pence per article. So this is a correct combination, paying for the correct rate on these articles. And this Gloucester Club, I will come back to that later in the presentation, because I have the similar items also for the consecutive 2 votings in 1966 and 1967. where you will find fascinating uses of the dollar values. But here the attraction should be the use of the £2 denominations, and this is the second discovery item in this collection presented for the first time here today. This is until now the only commercial use of the £2 denomination existing, and I regard this together with a limited Australian sources I am using one of the most important items of modern Australian philately. So I'm happy to share this moment with all of you. I have had it, of course, for a while myself, but now I can share it with many of you. Okay, this is now the turning point where we have come to the transition of the currencies. In 1963, the Australian government, they announced that they should switch currencies from pound values to dollar. And it was easy to decide to reuse the design of the stamps, which already existed. And the conversion date was set to 14th of February 1966. The stamps, they were although already released 1 week in beforehand. So they were issued on the 7th of February, put as the first date of sale of the decimal stamps. And the conversion from pre-decimal to decimal was set at 1 shilling to be 10 cents. So it should be quite easy to understand the conversion rates, which I have presented on the screen here together with the stamps. So the 4 shilling became 40 cents, the 10 shilling became $1, the £1 became $2, the 7 shilling 6 pence became 75 cents, the £2 became 4 cents, and the 5 shilling became 50 cents. And you should have in mind that it was allowed for a period of 2 years from the currency switch to combine the use of pre-decimals and decimal frankings. Though it was a quite long period of 2 years, I have only found one use on cover from the Navigator issue, and that is the one I have on the screen here. It is the 4 shilling stamp used together with a 50 cent stamp. And this is a use where you convert the rates together is for $1.40, reflecting the 4th weight step airmail printed matter rate to Italy. So have your eyes open for these combined frankings with pre-decimals and decimal frankings. They are rare. Regarding proofs from the decimals, they are not officially made, any such proofs, even though that it exists a few such proofs. And in my collection, I have 2 proofs of the decimals with the 70 cent denomination. And if you followed the stamps, they were issued in 1966, and these proofs, they are made in 1968, when the 70 cent denomination would be more useful than the 75 cent denomination, which actually was issued. And the note printing branch, they prepared for this switch, but it never came. So the 75 cent stamp of James Cook, which we will come back to, that remained. And these proofs of James Cook in 70 cent only, they are only existing as proofs. And we have 6 different colors of this proof, of which I have 2 in my possession. Together with them, I have the only existing progressive die proof of a denomination issued of the decimals. It is this $1 proof with Flinders, and this is the only progressive die proof in public private hands. It exists a second example of this proof in the archive of Australia Post. And of course, as philatelists, you all wonder how it come that they are existing on the market, and because they shouldn't. And Australia is a country of order, so they should have been kept in archives. But it is believed that these proofs, they came to the market from the estate of a former engraver working for the note printing branch in Australia. So they should not have come to the market, and the engraver, he should not have had these proofs in his possession, but he had. And today they make my day more happy, at least they improve my collection. In a collection of traditional philately, so far I have basically presented uses of the pre-decimals, because they are not existing in so many varieties. But coming now to the decimals, they definitely exist in availability to make this study pure traditional. So in my collection, I have also, of course, come to depth in presenting colors. All these stamps, they are recorded in different shades of colors, which I present. They do exist in different papers, and definitely I can present a study on plating and positioning the varieties existing, and that is what I am, of course, doing. I would like only to give you a brief overview of varieties I have. I have some very heavy offsets existing, and also, of course, giving the background and information how these came to happen. And basically all varieties of this kind are very rare, even though they exist, but they are very rare. It exists only by occasionally one sheet of the denominations issued. What makes this also interesting are, of course, how the manufacturing and production was made. And for that, I, of course, used the opportunity to make plate studies and how the stamps were positioned in the sheets, explaining also the printing method. And this is the perforation pips and the plate numbers, where I have introduced the two positions on the full sheet printed. And of course, I also go to depth in these studies. I have to the left here my page where I can explain perforation varieties. I have jumped perforation in this vertical pair in the top left corner. I have partly imperforate perforation to the left, and also imperforate examples to the right. And as the plates were worn along the printing, I have also gone to depth in presenting plate studies on very detailed varieties and positioning them. So for those of you who are classic traditional collectors, you should also perceive that for stamp issues 100 years later than many of you collects, the same appearances is fascinating to collect also on these modern stamps. Regarding the James Cook issue, it was made quite an interesting variety. To the left, I have given the example of how the 75-cent James Cook original was printed in sheets, but along the way, the plate was heavily worn. So to the right, you can see my graphic on top explaining and giving the background that the right part of the plate was heavily worn, and instead of manufacturing a new plate, the Australian Post decided to cut off vertically the right part of the plate and only deliver the left part, and that makes a variety of the gutter pairs. So the gutter pairs exists on the James Cook 75-cent also as vertical gutter pairs compared to the standard edition, which is to the left with horizontal gutter pairs. So that makes them more interesting as well. Regarding the use of the decimals, like with the pre-decimals, the solo uses are very rare generally, and not as rare as the pre-decimals, as the period in use were longer. But to find these as solo uses is more interesting for a collection of this kind. And I only wanted to show that I try to combine different postal items and different postal services. Here you have actually to the left on top, you have a special delivery solo use, where I have a domestic letter rate combined with the special delivery fee. 10 cents plus 65 cents makes 75 cents in total. It is a parcel tag to the left, a domestic parcel tag, domestically in Australia, paying for a parcel weighing from 3 to 7 pounds, paying 75 cents in total. And to the right, I have two different uses. One domestic use, paying for a military rate, official mail, where only the registration fee is to be paid with stamps, 75 cents, and a more commercial use to the right bottom, namely a second weight step airmail letter rate to United States of America. So the solo uses are interesting. Now I will present 3 items which I have said here are a kind of art of decimal philately. I will come back to that term, art of decimal philately, but this is a great item, a combination paying $7.45 in total for a 24th weight step air mail letter rate with registration to UK. A fantastic item in my eyes. An even more fascinating combination mix of these stamps is this use, paying $16.75 to Goodyear International Corporation in USA from Australia. And this is paying for a 67th weight step airmail letter rate to the USA. And for the record, 67th weight step in gram was 661 to 670 gram. And it is quite a large envelope in reality live. So you will see that when you see my exhibit live. And the use of the $2 on any commercial item is scarce. I mean, I don't have exact records of how many, but generally the use of the $2 and the $4, they are very rare. The third example is this one. This is one of only 3 recorded uses where all $3 denominations are recorded. So this is again a cover which is to the United Kingdom, paying $11.20 as a combination of stamps. And this is also a very large item, and you can see that I have had to rotate it 90 degrees to get space on an A3 page in my collection. Coming back to the Gloucester Soldiers Club, as you saw my use of the £2, I promised to show you also the consecutive years, 1966 and 1967. The left page is the £2 use I have already introduced, and to the right here I have the consecutive years of the elections to the same club. Again, business reply uses. The first one is paying $15.10 for not less than 302 members. And the third example is for 332 articles paying $16.60. And here, of course, the use of the $4 denomination is fascinating philatelically. So I really like this context with the three items together, reflecting everything in this exhibit. It reflects the currency reform going from pound to dollar. It reflects the mixed usage, which was the intention with these stamps. And it reflects the high degree of philatelic rarity using these high denominations like this. As this is high denominations, for collection purpose, Australian Post, they made collectors sets like the one I have here. And these collectors sets, they were either, the stamps, they were either cancelled to order with the canceller in the middle here. But in order to ensure that the high denominations not were able to be used, they were overprinted specimen. So these collectors sets, they were put to market for collectors to buy, including the stamps. And from that period, of course, I am fascinated by the overprint specimen, which exists on these 4 stamps here on the screen. And the specimen measured 15.5, 2.5 millimeters. And there is, of course, a variety of that as well. Rather smaller specimen overprint measuring only 15 millimeters. And there is 6 examples recorded of the double specimen, which I have presented to the right here. So this gives you also a background on the specimen overprints on these stamps which exists in the catalogs. There is also another example of specimen overprint, which were used as post office training stamps in Australia. 5 different types of specimen hand stamps are known on these issues, and I have recorded 3 different types on this slide. And they are all different in text and measurements. Okay, finally, I would like to give some acknowledgement who have inspired me to do this collection. It was originally James Peter Goff, known as Jamie in USA. He gave me a heads up to explore this issue. And as you saw on some of the slides, he also had some interesting examples which he later offered me to include in my collection. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm also very grateful to know Jamie, as many of you also know him. He is really knowledgeable in many different areas. And having that said, also Arthur Gray, who I met a few times, he was the originally big collector of everything in Australia, also including these stamps I have presented. Unfortunately, his collection of the pre-decimals and decimals came to sale, and I have, of course, included what I wanted from his collections of the Navigators. Torsten Weller in Australia, Abacus Auctions, is probably well known to many of you, and he has been a good source for me not only to find fine items many times, but also to understand postal history of Australia and the rate combinations and difficulties in that regard. One person I have only had contact with by email was Rod Perry. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. He is recognized in Australia as the Robson Love of Australian postal history, and he has educated many collectors on modern Australian postal history coming from the 20th century. Unfortunately, I never met him in person, but I have read very much of what he has published, and which is available online to read. And he is actually the one who gave the title Art of Decimal Philately, addressing the beauty of a combination high denominations as commercial use. And that's why I have implemented his term in my collection on beauty in that regard. And as postal historian, I was educated very early in my philatelic collecting by my friend Patrick Larsson in Sweden. He learned me one thing very early. Jonas, very many other collectors, they neglect to look for large size postal items. But you should look for the large size postal items, those who not fit into a normal page size. They are normally more interesting. And I adapted that very early in my collecting, and all my postal history collecting actually derive my most interesting items to being large sized. So I am very thankful for Patrick in that regard. What I would like to say here as well in this presentation is that if you collect Australian philately, you are very lucky, because they have probably among the best catalogs in the world. And that is thanks to the publisher Browst and White and the current editor of these catalogs, Jeff Kellow. I recently got the new edition of the Decimals, Volume 1, which contains my period of collecting, and they are really good. Not only catalogs listing prices. If you want to know every secret about stamps issued in Australia, these catalogs are fascinating to read, and not only to read, but also you understand the technique. So Jeff Kellow is fantastic in that regard to actually address this knowledge to normal people like myself, not technically orientated in regard of everything related to printing and technique. Having that said, my last slide, I mentioned to you that I have the only commercial use of the £2. And if you are following important news on the market, you might have recognized that a few years ago, it was actually a £2 use sold by Abacus in Australia. And why do I say that I have the only commercial use? Well, commercial use, I have explained the rate and the combination of the franking, and referred it to the use I presented. This use with these £2 of 8 together with a £1 and 10 shilling stamp of Flinders. Well, it is a franking and it is cancelled, but why it has paid £17 10 shilling, that is a mystery. But though the collector paid well for it, so maybe somebody else other than me in the future will tell what this is. I don't know yet, but for the correctness, I wanted to quit my presentation by this epilogue. If you want to know more, and if you didn't have the time to follow all my slides, my handout for today is available online. And that handout not only includes my slides, it actually also includes the article, which is published in the London Philatelist coming out this month. So you can read also more about how this is put in context. Having that said, Mark and Mike, this is the end of my presentation, and over to you.
Thank you, Jonas. Well, thank you very much. And yes, just to pick up on that final point that Jonas made, his handout is available on the Royal's website. It's on the London meetings page. When you expand the section about his presentation, you'll find a link to his handout. It's there now. Right, Mike, back to you.
Well, we appear to have no questions.
No, we do. We do have questions.
We do.
The questions have been coming to me. Is the good news. So shall we move to the questions?
Yes.
Right. Jonas, stand by. The good news is there's only 3 questions so far, but maybe more will come in as we're talking. You never know.
Nope.
Right. The first question is, This is from Ian Bridle, who asks, he says that paper thickness variations are very easy to physically measure using an electronic caliper gauge, but the color variations are quite subjective and can vary due to storage conditions. So how are the color variations defined that you noted?
It's a very good question, and I agree with the difficulty to define paper variety. Luckily, I have bought a reference collection. Part of what I have found along my collecting is that I bought an original reference collection from a collector who bought these stamps very early, and I have used that reference collection to differ between the color shades. So that is how I have actually made it myself. I have only in my collection presented one example of each. The main treatment is not at all based on color variety. I only present one example of each color because the color study is not the main treatment, but it should be represented.
Okay.
But that's my answer.
Thank you. Patrick Reed has a question relating to the $4 value. He starts out by saying, was the print quantity of the $4 much lower than the $2? He says he has a number of large blocks of the $2 that were removed from commercial covers containing large and heavy computer printouts that were sent to his section when he was at work. At the time, he hadn't learned about postal history back in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And of course, now he thinks he should have retained the covers. But he says the lack of $4 used makes him think that they were not readily available at the post office. So what was the print quantity of the $4 much lower?
It was lower, but surprisingly, actually, it was not very low numbers printed. I mean, that they were printed, yes, in lower editions, but I have not perceived a clear correspondence in between a very low number printed and the rare use I have found. And I have asked this question to people I have met in Australia. Why, though they are printed in quite many, why were they not used more? And I have never got any clear answer on that. But in fact, from the sources by Rod Perry, who I have been corresponding with on the recording numbers, they are recorded in very few uses. I know too of some existing sheets, blocks of $2 and $4, and they are quite rare also to find. I have surprisingly seen that they are really sought after. So he probably should be glad that he have them, and as long as they want to keep them. But I think there is a market to offer them to if he wants.
Yeah,
in that regard.
I'm sure, Pat, you're pleased to hear that. Next question comes from Paul Davey, who asks, Jonas, have you ever found these issues on postage due covers?
No, I have not seen it on postage due. What I did have is the closest to that is the surcharged 286 articles I had from Kodak. Kodak, I had one example in my collection where I had the 11-pound use for that surcharge, but not as pure postage due. No.
Okay. On the subject of printing quantities, Ingo Nessel asks, are printing quantities known?
Yes, they are known, and they are presented in my collection, and some of the examples only are in my handout, but printing numbers are known, and they are clearly defined in the bruised and white catalogs, so they are available. And if I can help he can send me an email and I will send the printing quantities for these 6 stamps, definitely.
Thank you, Jonas. Jonas, Mike, that was the last question that I've seen from anybody. So I think we should say that the Q&A session is complete. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I would like to say, Jonas, very well done. That was an excellent start to our new season. Very, very clear, very well illustrated, and an awful lot of information to take in. I don't know whether amused is the right word, but you used the word modern. And in reality, we're looking at a period of still over 50 years ago. And you made comments about the difficulty of getting hold of such material, something which I can completely agree with, given that I'm also a collector of early QE2 material. And that you and I joked the other day that they're very much more difficult to get hold of proof material for such things than it is for material over 150 years old. Anyway, that being the case, we've seen a traditional approach. So you've shown us design proofs, presentation sheets, actual stamps, rates, and a wonderful array of different usages. And you also say that it's very important in a royal display, if you can, to show something original. And you've met that requirement. You've shown us 2 new original items, a unique pair of the 7 and 6 James Cook die proof, and a mixed franking amounting to £7 10 and 6pence, including the use of the £2 pre-decimal. So thank you very much for that brilliant display. I know you've done a detailed note, and I know you've done an article in the London Philatelist, which has already been mentioned. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to conclude by saying our president, Peter Coburn, would like to add his gratitude, I know. So if you're there, Peter.
I am indeed. And first of all, I would like to add my thanks to Jonas for an extremely interesting and excellent presentation. It's really taught me quite a lot about showing traditional exhibits of so-called modern material. I'm sure Jonas knows that my interest is only actually about 20 years before his. And I just love the idea that the way of making this really exciting is to go for these enormous envelopes, which were properly franked, properly cancelled, properly calculated, and they add hugely, I think, to a collection, and in particular, they add hugely to Jonas's presentation. Thank you very much indeed. I must also add that it is fascinating, is it not, when one is trying to explain the pounds, shillings and pence arrangements to one's grandchildren in England, that a Swedish gentleman can do it so succinctly and so successfully. And thank you for that, Jonas, too. I'd also like to take the opportunity of thanking my Vice President, Mike Roberts, who's put together this program and has made a very positive contribution to the development of the Society thereby. I'd also like to thank the IT committee, particularly chaired by Mark Bailey, for all the work that he has done today, but also throughout the lockdown, when he has assiduously helped us to have digital meetings and joined us all together throughout the world on many occasions. I'd now like to present Jonas with a certificate of appreciation to say thank you. And Mark, if you'd be kind enough to show us that, I'd be most grateful.
Yes, Peter, I'm just trying to find it on my computer. I did have it available just now. Can't seem to find it. Why not?
While you are looking for that,
Sorry, yes. Yeah,
thank
sorry,
you.
Jonas. Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Mike, for your fine feedback, and I appreciate that. So thank you. And seeing all of you online reminds me how much I miss to meet you live. So I'm really looking forward to do that in the near future. Not only you and Mike, Peter, but all of you. I'm addressing all of you I saw have been online. Looking forward to that. I miss you.
Indeed. Yes. Now, I am getting there, Peter. Sorry, it's just that for some reason, which is currently escaping me, but for some reason it's not coming up. But I'm persevering with it. You know what I'm like. I'll get there. Never say never.
My collection I have presented is prepared for exhibition, so I will have 6 frames to exhibit, but I have decided to honor the Australian contingent by actually presenting it there first. So I save it here in my safe until Australia will reopen. And reading the news in Sweden, I don't perceive that Australia will open until 2023. So it will be a while until then, but the first launch of this exhibit you have seen today will be in Australia when I can come there to exhibit nationally. So Malcolm, do you know more on when Australia perhaps can open? You tell me, please.
There's a FAIAP exhibition scheduled for next September, but that's looking highly unlikely because the government's still allowing people to travel overseas, but there's no guarantee you'll come home again without joining a queue. So there's no one's willing to travel anywhere until we get the all clear to do that. So there's a national in Perth in 2023 you might like to look at.
That's
there's a highly likely possibility.
My company, we are working with Australia every day, and I'm working with them every day, more or less. And they told me today that you should not expect, Jonas, that you can come here professionally until 2023. So that means philatelically as well.
Yeah,
quite right. Yeah.
Anyway, Peter, I have the certificate ready for you.
Thank you. So, Jonas, digitally, I shake your hand, and I thank you from myself and from all the members of the Royal Philatelic Society London for your display. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and this certificate will, of course, be printed out and signed and sent to you in due course. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, if I may come back for a moment, while I have an audience just for a little while, if you'll forgive me, Jonas and Mike, I just wanted to mention that on this coming Thursday, that's only 48 hours away, Malcolm Ray Smith will be physically showing the Royal Mail from 1516 to 1766. That's from 1 p.m. There is a Congress in Harrogate starting on the 23rd of September, and Stampex in London will start on the 29th of September. And on the 30th, James Grimwood Taylor will be showing us another physical exhibit in London, to which I hope as many of you as are able to get there will be able to come. And finally, the next digital meeting organized by Mike Roberts is on the 5th of October, when Mike Roberts from Huddersfield, and sometimes from Cumbria, but on this occasion he's coming from Gambia, probably on an elephant, but we're looking forward to seeing his collection very much indeed. And that just as a final shot, Jonas, at one stage during your presentation, you said that you showed a couple of items which had clearly been stolen from the printer, but had ended up in your collection and made you happy.
Yeah.
I think that I don't mind things that have been stolen that appear in my collection. Makes me happy too. And today you have made us all extremely happy. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mike, back to you.
Well, I haven't got anything further to say other than thank you very much, and I think that concludes everything.